The Iowa Hawkeyes are one win away from winning the West Division of the Big Ten Conference. We'll talk about it throughout the week, coverage leading up to Iowa's massive Black Friday showdown against the Huskers. But today, here on November 20th, we're going to call this Anterio Thompson Day. Iowa nabbing a big-time commitment from a junior college transfer from Iowa Western, a guy who committed just a couple weeks back. We haven't talked about him on this show. We're going to do so today. And we'll also talk with Anterio himself. A special edition of Brad's Branded Thoughts being released later today with Mr. Thompson himself. But first, I want to talk to you about Under the Kitchen. Randy Engel doing great work. He's selling Spencer Lee prints, Arlen Bruce prints. He's got prints for Tavian Banks, Tyler Goodson. Randy Engel selling Hawkeye prints across the state, across the country. Contact him. You can contact him by checking out his Facebook page, Under the Kitchen on Facebook, for more details. And Ascent Nutrition, their Ascent Coffee. I talk about it almost every day because it's great stuff. It gets you ready for your day. Visit goascentnutrition.com for this mold, mycotoxin-free, premium Ascent Coffee. Goascentnutrition.com. And courtesy of From the Hawkeye of the Storm and Ascent Nutrition, use the code Hawkeyes at checkout for 15% off your order. So Iowa landing a junior college transfer in Anterio Thompson, a kid who's from Dubuque Hempstead, originally didn't have much attention out of high school. We're going to talk with Anterio later today during Brad's Branded Thoughts, our podcast. His story is fascinating, and you're just going to have to stay tuned for that. But again, that'll be released later today, a sit down with Anterio Thompson himself. But didn't have much attention out of high school, really not much as far as FBS attention at all. Ends up going kind of the back route, if you will, to Iowa Western, which has produced a number of terrific pro prospects, really. I mean, Davion Nixon being one, and you see some similarities in Anterio's game and Davion Nixon's game. Not saying he's the next Davion Nixon, but some of his intangibles are there. Let's talk about Anterio and kind of lead up to that interview this evening. Now, again, I preface everything on this show, and I'm talking about recruits, by acknowledging the fact that what I'm looking at is basically highlight film and what you're able to look at. So you kind of have to read between the lines of these things. And certainly you can, you're looking at highlight film. You can kind of compare and contrast with other prospects. I'll say one thing that jumps off the screen for me for Anterio. I mentioned the comparison to Davion Nixon. It just reminds me of Davion Nixon's big pick six and return against Penn State back in 2020 when everybody was comparing him to Luka Garza on the football field. I mean, here's a big defensive tackle who's 300 pounds. And, he kind of does a swim move, or if you want to call it a Euro step on a pick six return. I'm not saying that Anterio Thompson's going to somehow emulate that when he gets to Iowa. He ran a 4.6. Anterio Thompson ran a 4.61 at a Nebraska football camp. All right. Now, keep in mind, he is 6'2", 295. All right. And that's about the same size that Davion Nixon was at this level. Davion was about 6'2", 295. Now, he ended up, I think, putting on maybe 10, 15 pounds once he got to Iowa. He was a dominant force at Iowa. And you look at Anterio, he's got a great motor. I talk about that every time we discuss Iowa defensive line recruits, because that's obviously something Jay Neiman, Kelvin Bell, Phil Parker, and this staff, Kirk Ferentz, what they target. They want guys with good, solid motors. And obviously Iowa wants depth along that defensive line. They like to use 8, 9, sometimes even 10 guys. Perfect example of that is Ethan Hurkett. Now, Ethan Hurkett's a bit undersized, but he's an Iowa kid with a really good motor. And I think Anterio Thompson fits that mold. He's also extremely physical. This dude looks the part at 6'2", 295. He's a guy that's not only going to take space up the middle and make it difficult for opposing running backs to find green grass, he's a guy who's going to get to the backfield. He is not your typical defensive tackle. He had offers from a number of schools, and this is what's intriguing. You look at his offer list. He had offers from Kansas, Nebraska, Buffalo, South Dakota, Liberty, Eastern Michigan, Memphis, UNLV, Washington State, Utah State, Western Kentucky, Illinois, North Carolina State, and of course, Iowa. I mean, we're talking schools across the country. Now, that's a testament to a couple of things. A, who Anterio Thompson is, and you can't really call him under the radar when he's getting attention from Power 5 schools across the country. but B, how respected that program down in Council Bluffs is at Iowa Western. And yes, they've produced a number of pro prospects. Anterio Thompson's got a chance to be another one. Now, what will his impact be in 2023? Anterio did tell me that he hopes to enroll early. That's good news if you're hoping for early playing time. That doesn't guarantee it. Brian Allen Jr. Enrolled early this past spring, and he hasn't seen the field this fall. Iowa, of course, is deep along that defensive line, but we don't know what's going to happen with Logan Lee, with Noah Shannon, with Joe Evans. Who will come back? Who will leave? Those are all question marks. The transfer portal is an ongoing thing. So Anterio Thompson could very well come in here, get an early start in the spring, and play in the fall. Physically, he looks the part. He has gotten an extra year here to develop, and he'll have several years to make an impact here at Iowa. So congratulations to Anterio Thompson. Phil Parker, Kelvin Bell, this is a good win over a number of big-time programs that were after this kid, who, again, is a physical kid, a quick kid, certainly for his size. I mean, when's the last time you've seen a defensive tackle run a 4.6 and a guy that just doesn't stop? His motor is terrific and somewhat similar to Davion Nixon. I'm real hesitant to make that comparison at this point. By the way, this guy's oozing with confidence. You're going to hear that in our interview this evening with Anterio Thompson. So tune in later today here on Sunday, November 20th for a special edition of Brad's Branded Thoughts featuring the one and only Anterio Thompson from Iowa Western and 2023 Iowa football commit.